Welcome to the Flow Summit. I'm Aletheia, spiritual alchemist, mystic, medium, initiate and teacher for 25 years of Eastern and Western esoteric subjects. I developed a method of self-awareness based on spiritual alchemy called New Alchemy in Hungary, which is in the last 11 years has grown into a flourishing independent academy where I've taught thousands of people. In this lecture, I introduce you to the knowledge, the precious legacy which the most outstanding authors, scholars, leaders and thinkers of past millennia received, an extraordinary energy channeled from the source beyond the material. For sure, you have already heard the law of the conservation of energy. That is, energy is neither lost nor created. This is one of the most remarkable fundamental laws of physics, the truths of which no one can question. The problem starts if you believe that it relates to you as a person too. With the rise of materialism, the human individual has been subordinated to these laws, demoting human to mere matter. You can only realize what the human beings is actually created to do if you can transcend the idea that energy cannot be created. This way, you can enable yourself to step into a new level of existence. There are two types of energy in a symbolic language, fire, residing inside each person. One is destructive, digestive fire. This is the fire of oxidation, disintegration and decline. The other quality of fire is called heavenly fire. This name relates to the power that originates on the plane of the transcendent, the energy of the divine, the energy of the spiritual source. Human beings are in a special position. One can reach a state of consciousness in which they are able to intentionally access and ignite the fire of heaven inside themselves, because each individual is a gateway, a channel between the material and the divine. In this lecture, I'm going to speak about ways how to achieve this and share an alchemical exercise with you with the help of which you can begin this process inside yourself. Are we going to manufacture gold? No. Then what does it mean that you will do an alchemical exercise? Alchemists, in the eyes of many, are curiously strange characters who waste their whole life uselessly trying to turn base metals into gold, though they never succeed. Well, there were such people too, that's true. However, there have always been several levels of alchemy. One branch of alchemy was genuinely concerned with the making of gold, and actually this opened up the space for what we now call experimental natural science, where alchemical descriptions were taken literally. Experiments were carried out at physical level to transform metals. These people were forerunners of modern chemistry. At the same time, some initiates of alchemy, gold making served as an effective cover for practicing a metaphysical tradition that had originated in the ancient mystery schools, but later become heresy, so could only flourish in secrecy. And this was spiritual alchemy, where chemical processes served as symbols for the transformation of the human psyche, for the description of its development. Its true goal is to ennoble the consciousness of the human being to produce non-physical gold. In this mysterious tradition, thousands of years old, gold making was merely an encoded phrase, and it was in fact based on varied knowledge and techniques that allowed man to undergo miraculous transformations in body, soul and spirit alike. So I'm a representative of a tradition that comes from the ancient times when spirituality, science and art were still one. They were not separated. I know that the isolation of these three areas in our times is only temporary, and I'm one of those who are working to re-establish the unity of these three: spirituality, science and art. Truly, These fields are not enemies of each other, but each addresses a different part of the human being. Science speaks to the material part of the consciousness, to our mind. Art speaks to our soul, while spirituality speaks to our spirit. Spiritual alchemy calls itself the royal art, ars regia, because this secret tradition was a science, a spiritual practice, and an art of self-development, these all in one, which is to say, the art of ennobling the human soul into gold. For me, it was a long journey to discover this tradition. As an alchemical initiate, my name is Aletheia, but how did I get here? In 1998, at the age of 24, I was a student graduating as graphic designer at an arts and design university, and I was already working as a designer at one of the biggest international record labels. I wasn't unsuccessful, but I still had a feeling of emptiness in my heart. So one day I took a pair of scissors and trimmed my long hair to get rid of my petrified ego, and I moved out of the capital into a house in a forest. Earlier, I hadn't been particularly interested in spirituality, but then something happened to me that completely shattered my worldview and my life altogether. I attended a public event through a friend where, without warning, I entered a state of trance and began to see, hear, and experience another dimension. I experienced the liberation of my consciousness from my body. I experienced a new plane of reality where I encountered the tranquility of limitless power, unlimited knowledge, happiness, love, and immortality. Through these experiences, I began to acquire special abilities. It was a mystical sensitivity through which philosophies and sacred texts that I've never read nor knew existed appeared in my mind. In intense visions, I had personal contact with spiritual beings and became increasingly certain that I had access to what I had learned in previous lives. I began to sense the thoughts, emotional states, and health conditions of those who approached me. I soon found myself drawn into the world of mediums and spiritual healers. Politicians, television personalities, artists started to seek me out so they could hear the messages I was receiving from the spiritual dimension. I started to research spiritual traditions with incredible intensity. That's how I found an Indian spiritual school. In the 10 years that followed, I had the life-changing experience of being a personal disciple and inner circle member of a Hindu guru in Calcutta, who was a world-famous living legend. He gave me invaluable knowledge, serious training, and in 2002 I was ordained as priest. I went to numerous ashrams around the world, studied Vedic philosophy, and practiced different branches of meditation, mantras, yoga, bhakti, and tantra. I taught Vedic philosophy for 10 years. But how did I become a researcher and enthusiast of alchemy? At some point, I had to admit, I realized that the Eastern path of self-realization I had been practicing, for me, were only touching the surface. And after a while, my personal development stalled. So, turning my back on all my beliefs, I began a new research. In 2012, I went to Portugal, where I discovered the tradition of spiritual alchemy, which opened a new dimension and gave me the answers I've been missing in Vedic philosophy. I was fascinated by spiritual alchemy. Its initiations opened up ever greater depths for me. After a few years, I founded my own school, New Alchemy. Now let's get down to our topic. Everyone has desires, some will, some power. What is the secret of those who really stand out? What does it take to make something happen, to make an impact, to move the world around us? Most self-development methods advise try to do these things. Set goals, do your best, release your inhibitions, study, work hard, and so on. and then you can achieve something. All this is true, and indeed we should do so, but there are limits to this: the body, the nervous system, and the brain. And the myriad of external influences, for example, the problems you have in your lives, spoiling your mood, discouraging you, sometimes even from living. In these cases, the energy you gain is limited, but this method thinks horizontally. They can only think of drawing energy and power from the horizontal plane, from the material. What gives you life force then? Beyond food and nutrition, it is the attention, appreciation, and love coming from others, and the feeling of success. These are the sources you draw energy from on the horizontal plane. But all these are finite and highly conditional. External circumstances often deprive you even of this. Think of situations like your partner leaving you, your boss promoting someone else, your business failing, your friend turning back on you, you getting sick, or your child is becoming ill, and the list goes on and on. In contrast, there is a source that emerges from the horizontal plane, and the characteristic of this power is that it is independent of external conditions. This is the transcendental power that is along the vertical axis. If you are in sync with this power, if you can have this flow through you, then an energy will emerge within you that no one can take away from you, and that is unlimited. This is the true flow experience. And we claim that this is the original capacity of the soul, which has been forgotten by most of the humanity by today, making them run up and down, panicking, trying to draw energy from the horizontal plane. Yet the flow between the transcendent and the material world can be restored for us humans via the channels or instruments of this flow. We all carry within ourselves the gateway between the material and the supermaterial. Alchemy is looking for this source of power, and when it says it's making gold refers to a state in which one is connected to the source of supermaterial energy, and when the transcendent or divine energy appearing inside makes one as radiant and precious as gold. In this symbolism, all those who are completely stuck on the material plane are symbolized by lead as a heavy, dull metal. So spiritual alchemy codifies the way in which individual alchemists connect with the divine energy source and achieve superior abilities, creative power, mental strength, above average concentration, or vitality independent of the physical condition of the body itself. And my observation is that by connecting with this energy source, not only do you become energized, but also your functioning in the world or realizing your plans will become less inhibited. One is immersed in a kind of ceaseless synchronicity experience. And another striking feature of this state, that is your intuition becomes unbelievably refined. What makes us capable of this? The human is a complex being. Human consciousness is something quite extraordinary because it consists of three different viewpoints at the same time. One, the physical, bodily point of view. Two, the consciousness of the soul. And three, the spiritual consciousness. One of the secrets of alchemy is the ability to distinguish, separate, and apply these three kinds of consciousness. And it is the consciousness of the spiritual self within us that connects us to the supermaterial dimension. How can we bring this into reality in an explosive way? This is where alchemy brings a unique, rapid, and profound transformation, very much like a laboratory reaction. This is why chemical reactions in the laboratory were used as symbolic language to describe this process. According to this, gold is made in the alchemist's lab out of 3 basic components. The holy trinity of alchemy is salt, mercury, and sulfur. They are called the living elements to show that they are no means the ordinary salt crystal on the table and mercury that ran in the old thermometers. When alchemy tells us that it makes gold from salt, mercury, and sulfur, it is actually a coded message. Salt, mercury, and sulfur are none other than 3 states of being. Salt symbolizes the material state of being. Mercury is the state of being capable of change and being in flow, while sulfur is the symbol of the high energetic state of being. But what does all this refer to? What can have such states of being? It is not our body, but our soul. It is an observation in alchemy that the soul exists in 3 different states of being, and these are symbolized by salt, mercury, and sulfur. Now let's see what this means in practice. Salt indicates that the soul is rigid, as if were solid or material. People who cannot enjoy life, who cannot experience joy or harmony or become relaxed, who are constantly under the influence of their past, their unpleasant memories and experiences are in this state of salt. I'm sure you know people whose thoughts are negative, full of fear, rejection, and hostility. Even if they give a good opportunity, they see only downsides and dangers. They can't enjoy even the best holiday. Something is always bothering them. They are not able to relax. Their thinking is very much down to earth or mundane. They just bound it to their gray reality. For them, there exists only what they perceive with their physical senses. They don't understand anything spiritual. When they encounter something supernatural, it makes them anxious. Living in this state, people derive all their energy from the material, from their bodies, from the physical food, from physical pleasures. And because these are finite, they basically have low vitality. They are difficult to be moved, to be inspired or motivated. When the soul is stuck in the state of salt, consciousness is limited to the body. These people perceive only their own physical incarnation. To sum up, in the salt state of being, the soul is stuck. That is, it is not in flow. Mercury, on the other hand, is the material that changes easily. It turns liquid in moments and then easily turns to vapor if boiled. It is the metal that flows and turns to steam. This is why the alchemists choose it as a symbol of a state of being characterized by the ability to flow. In this Mercury state, the soul becomes dissolved. It is freed from frozen, stuck mental states. One is inspired, enthusiastic, flexible. It is in this condition of the soul one has the experience of oneness with the present activity. People have the ability to enjoy being with others. They experience existence as a natural and joyful thing. At the same time, they may have troubles or painful past, but can still live in the present and enjoy it. Reality is not perceived merely at the level of matter. For people in the state of Mercury, spiritual, mental things are also real. They are often more successful than others. They connect easily and can sense if things gain momentum. They are in flow with their thoughts, with their feelings, and these all are in harmony with the universe. The Mercury state means that one is in flow. Flow was originally named by Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi and described as a psychological state. Psychology is concerned with the psyche, that is to say, the soul. The first milestone in understanding alchemy is to grasp that in fact it doesn't deal with the material or metals, but with souls, where the chemical symbols conceal the transformation of the soul. So the raw material of laboratory work is not a physical matter, but the soul. Carl Gustav Jung also recognized this. It is no coincidence that psychology has drawn a lot from alchemy. It grew out of alchemy and developed into a science. Flow theory is based on the observation that the human psyche can move from the stuck, blocked state to a more relaxed or flowing state. This is getting into flow. The phenomenon of flow is also known in alchemy, and in its own terminology, this is when the soul transforms from salt to mercury. The soul that has been stuck and stalled and fixed becomes dissolved and metaphorically fluid, that is, it starts to flow. When the flow expands, it becomes a boundless spiritual state of consciousness. This is the state of sulfur in alchemy. Sulfur, the flame itself, is a non-physical state of fire. Sulfur is a fire that doesn't burn because it is in fact the manifestation of transcendent power. The state of sulfur means an extremely high energy level in which one can experience oneness, harmony, joy and creativity, and come into contact with the transcendent beyond matter. Alchemists worked consciously to achieve these states. But how did they do it? What was their method? When one encounters alchemy, one is struck by the rich imagery they have built up, what a rich store of symbols they use to express their message. And of course, the question immediately arises, who could help us to decipher this? Alchemists used fire to refine common metals into gold, and in their laboratory they worked with a mysterious furnace called Ottanor. It was the central source of fire in the alchemists' laboratories. They used it to heat matter to make it transform. But what exactly an Ottanor was like, that was a closely guarded secret. The name itself comes from the Arabic word Ot-Tanur, meaning furnace. It is a kind of coal-fired furnace that burns continuously, and it is special because it has not one, but 3 chambers. But what kind of fire burns in this Ottanor? You may have realized that the fire is a symbol of energy in alchemy, and when alchemists talk about fire, they don't mean the ordinary fire that can be started with a matchstick or a flint. In alchemy, there are 2 kinds of fire. One is called the destructive fire. This is the fire of oxidation, decomposition, and decay. It is the force that breaks down the bonds and causes things to decay, bodies to age. And there is another fire, which is the opposite. The fire of sulfur that doesn't burn, the fire without heat. This is the transcendent power of the spirit. This power is not of earthly origin, which is why alchemists call it heavenly fire. It is the heavenly fire that brings matter to life. Everything that is alive has a glimmer of it. And the human being is in the unique position of being able to access and ignite this fire within themselves through their consciousness. The human being is the channel between the material and the divine. The alchemists who wanted to make physical gold experimented in the 3 fire chambers of their Ottanor, heating physical matters in a physical flame and thus inducing the real chemical reactions. But, as we have seen, Fire symbolizes power in spiritual alchemy, so we can also suspect that Atanor doesn't refer to a physical furnace, but rather to a symbolic object. This is why Atanor is spoken of as a cosmic furnace, where the aim is to produce auris non vulgi, or gold that is not ordinary. So Atanor in spiritual alchemy is not an object, but a symbol of the human being themselves. In other words, a human being is a three-centered power complex in which extreme energy can be released. The next question is, where are these three chambers of fire resides within us? The human being has a hidden anatomy. We can say that just as the physical body has organs that serve biological existence, so in the subtle physical body we have figurative organs that harness and channel the energy and the transcendental power that is the heavenly fire. In Hinduism, the model for this is the system of the chakras and the pathway for Kundalini and Prana. In Western mysticism, however, there is another system, a unique concept, which is not based on the chakras and which doesn't appear in the Eastern teachings. This is the doctrine of the three centers of consciousness. In alchemy, there are three centers in human being where energy or force is concentrated and consciousness manifests itself in different qualities. These three centers of power and consciousness is the pelvic area, the heart area, and the head area. These three areas defines the three centers. Today, more and more are discovering a link between the heart and the brain. The best-known teachers talk about the coherence between the heart and the head. Why and how can these two areas of the human body be connected? Alchemists believe that the heart and the head, as a center of consciousness and power, are indeed connected. They also add the pelvic area to it and claim that this is how the human being becomes complete. Each center of consciousness represents a different source of power within us, and they are connected by the spinal canal. The pelvic area is the center of energy that comes from our instincts, our body. It is also where Kundalini resides. The heart area is the center of our mystical power with the force and wisdom of emotions. The head area with the brain is the source of our mental power. Pelvic, heart, and head, the three centers. This is how a special instrument, the three-chambered furnace, is completed within us. When these three centers are not connected, we are stuck. When they are connected, a flow of energy is created. This internal stream of energy is called the minor flow. Why do I call it minor flow? Because in this case, the source is just our own internal power. If we can create the minor flow within ourselves, that is the dynamic flow of our internal forces, we will clearly feel much better. The foggy and helpless state in which we are stuck, in which our lives many seem hopelessly difficult, and our desires simply a distant mirage, all this will disappear. But the Atanor as a human powerhouse can be switched to an even higher level. This is the stage when the three fire chambers open to become gateways to the heavenly fire, the energy flow from a transcendental source. When this energy begins to flow through us, this is what we call the major flow. This is the state when the soul proceeds the transmutation from salt to its, to say, from a stuck state, when the soul behaves like matter in a particle-like nature and one is completely lost in oneself. So from this state of salt, the soul first moves to the state of mercury, which means it reaches a higher energy level and begins to flow. We can say that by this, the soul becomes wave-like. This is the state of minor flow. Then comes the sulfur state, when the soul awakens and heavenly fire within itself and makes this transcendent power flow through itself. This is when the soul achieves the state of major flow. To achieve all of this, we have to go through a transformation, and this is a complex job. In the symbolism of alchemy, the impure substance is heated, boiled, and then the pure from the impure is separated in order to extract the elixir that enables to make gold. This process is called transmutation and is broken down into 7 steps. The first step is calcination, or heating. Why am I telling you all of this? I would like to give you an exercise that you can do now to start this transformation within yourself. But I'm in a bit of trouble. Real spiritual work is never about some instant techniques. Spiritual practice such as meditation or imagination already requires that our consciousness has power and that our unconscious doesn't obstruct the work. What do I mean? You have probably experienced that when you close your eyes and need to be in a meditation for a longer period of time, or you want to work with inner images in guided imagination, for example, it is not so easy. Why? Because by closing your eyes, your attention immediately turns to your mental body that holds all your memories, all your emotional and thought patterns, and they are full of tension. Because of this, during the mental exercise, we often have distracting thoughts, disturbing images, feelings, memories, etc. And they don't let you relax, but even worse, they take away the mental energy needed for the exercise itself. Many people believe that they only have to think of positive things to actually create them. Is this really the case? Human consciousness has a creative capacity, it's true. It is thought consciousness that makes the matter move. This is the 1,000-year-old teachings of spiritual alchemy, which has become popular today. Another claim is that like attracts like. This is also originates in spiritual alchemy. It is one of the 7 universal principles of Hermetic philosophy. This alchemical principle has been adapted by many New Age methods, and the belief has emerged that if we think of good things, we will actually attract good things. However, this doesn't work for everyone. Masses try to change their lives in this way, but their reality remains one of pain and unhappiness. And there is a reason for that. The idea of like attracts like is incomplete. It has spread in an incomplete way. The original principle of alchemy says all uninhibited things seek and attract the like. Uninhibited, that is the point. Consciousness becomes a creator only when it is uninhibited. In other words, if one's unconscious is full of negativity, it is polluted by the energy of traumas, fears. These inhibiting forces will block their pure mental power to emerge in a thought and really move to the world around them. Without it, it's just relaxation, fantasizing, or daydreaming. That is why if you want to start doing mental work, first you must release the inner blockages and blocked forces in your subconscious or your mental body. It is a complex, deep work which we call nigredo work. The word nigredo means blackness, and in alchemy, nigredo is the initial stage of transformation. That is when our unconscious is still polluted, inhibited, dark. At nigredo level, we have characterized by fears, illusions, pains, and conflicting thoughts. From this state, we have to transform ourselves to albedo, which means white. which refers that the light has already emerged in our consciousness. The work of Nigredo level involves many things that I cannot talk about in this lecture due to time constraints. But what is important, that is, the first step is to light the fire in your own atonor or alchemical furnace and start a kind of internal combustion. This is calcination, burning, heating. The inner fire ignited by calcination helps us to get to a higher emotional vibrational level, which is important because it brings us out of our own inhibited, polluted mental body for the time of the exercise. What do I mean? When you have a lot of problems, you feel heavy as lead, your head is foggy and you have hardly any strength. But in this state, if you go out with friends and have a good dance, for example, your emotional vibration will temporarily rise and your worries will be forgotten for the time being. Then in this state of delight and ecstasy, your soul is temporarily lifted out of its tense mental body. But when this goes away, the soul submerges back into it and you become depressed, sad and unhappy again. In New Alchemy, we say that you should consciously bring yourself into a state of ecstasy or near to ecstasy by engaging your body and then use this high emotional vibration to create mentally. So for mental work, we don't sit down or relax, but on the contrary, we bring the body and the soul into the very high emotional state, a state of ecstasy. We have developed our own method for this called Alchemist Lab exercise. This involves a rather complex technique, and over the past 11 years, thousands of people have done it with us. They have had incredible experiences of making a difference in their lives through our Alchemist Lab exercise. In our lab exercises, we work on all three levels, body, soul and spirit simultaneously, and we awaken the inner fire within ourselves, the inner flow, and then with this mental power, we open the door to the major flow, that is, we experience the heavenly fire. These practices also involve a complex self-awareness work in order to release inhibiting or toxic energies from the unconscious, similar to boiling a contaminated substance in a flask, which then evaporates the toxins by breaking the chemical bonds and eventually results in the clean liquid. This is the transformation from salt into mercury, metaphorically. You may begin with this introductory exercise. Do it when and where you are alone, so no one can see you. Choose the music that really gets you fired up. It can be any kind of music. Listen loudly and start jumping around intensely, moving around as you feel comfortable. Keep doing this until you feel yourself warming up, and more importantly, until you feel as if you don't have a single thought. You have only pure emotions, you feel enthusiastic and cheerful. This is a simple form of calcination. When you are done with this and you feel an inner fire, sit down with your spine straight and close your eyes. Imagine that there is a flick of fire in the middle of your pelvis, heart and head alike. Concentrate on making this spark stronger and turning it into a source of light within yourself. Then connect these three energy sources along an axis, your spinal canal. Once you have done this, change your breathing and start pumping your breath like a pair of bellows to start a fire. This is the activation of the three fire chambers of your own atonor at beginner level. When your consciousness shifts, you can feel the flow. You can use this state of focus on your own healing to work on achieving your goals, or you're thinking about making life happier, more harmonious. You create this with your awakened mental power. So the 3 steps again. First step, calcination by moving in order to lift body and soul out of the blocks of the mental body. Second step, turning on the Athanor by increasing the spark of life and applying pumping breathing in your 3 centers of consciousness, the pelvis, the heart and the head. And the third step is then on the appearance of light, then comes mental creation by which you can ennoble yourself and your life. Do this exercise regularly and you will be most surprised at how many wondrous experiences you will gain and how close you will come to experiencing what we call flow. What is the significance of this exercise? Humanity suffers from constantly violating and ignoring its own original resources. However, these are always at its disposal. We are here to share our spiritual gifts, our talents with the world that needs them. You may have the impression that only unscrupulous and pushy people can succeed in the world these days, not the sensitive spiritual ones. This is not the case. Sensitivity can go hand in hand with overwhelming power, and that is true wealth. The original purpose of the soul is not to exploit matter, but to transcend it. The soul doesn't want to take away anything, but to contribute. This original state of being can be restored if we are able to access our transcendental source of inherent divine power again. Thank you for taking these first steps into the world of alchemy with me. See you next time.